Oh, yeah. Kyle Rittenhouse, not guilty on all charges. Oh, yeah. And I know the left are seething right now. Oh, my gosh. This is just another win for white supremacy. Oh, no. Another win for the American. So we're going to hear Ben Shapiro and my boy Michael Knowles, their take on what just happened.
So let's talk about the verdict. So obviously not guilty on all charges. The thing that stunned me about the controversy over this is that the standard in American law is reasonable doubt, right? It wasn't even that the defendant in this case, Rittenhouse, had to prove that he did this in self-defense. He had to prove that there was reasonable doubt that he might have done this in self-defense. There is no human being with more than 2 neuronal firing synapses who did not know this was the case. Everybody knew that this was the case. If you had a prefrontal cortex and you watched this trial for more than 35 seconds, you knew the prosecution had nothing. You knew all of their witnesses.
Right. Every single witness that the prosecution brought forward, we're basically supporting the defendant's case. Quite hilarious.
Were defense witnesses. You knew that all of the tape backed Rittenhouse's account. It is astonishing to me that there's still members of the media claiming that for some larger purpose, Rittenhouse had to go to jail, which, by the way, shows you where they are, because it was never about the case. And it's never about the case, right? It's never about the circumstances of the individual case. It's always about the broader narrative that must be pushed. And just like you got to break a few eggs to make a Stalinist omelet, you have to break a few defendants in order to create social justice, according to these jerks. And so the fact that the jury stood up, did the right thing here, is pretty impressive. It also, I think, underscores how much of a threat they were under, really, because to get them to not guilty, that means that that's either somebody had to be convinced to go not guilty, in which case the entire jury had to bring, logic to bear, or they were not guilty from the outset. And they were waiting because they didn't want to be run up a flagpole for the grave misstep of somehow just saying the obvious right away. Whatever the case may be.
Right. So they had to basically stall for time, it looks like, because I think if anybody following this case paid attention to the details, you could see that this was obviously a case for self-defense. Obviously.
It is perfectly obvious that this jury did the right thing, which means, of course, that the media and the court of public opinion will deem that the jury did the wrong thing. It's
well. This is what
you know. What? At least Kyle Rittenhouse is going to jail.
Right. No. This is what
yeah.
I want to know, though. On that period where they're just deliberating and say, what on earth could you be talking about? Were they waiting for a mistrial? Were they trying to kick the can to someone else?
Yep.
Or were they?
That's what I think.
Do you think that they were actually debating any of the facts of the case?
Who the hell knows? I have no idea what was going on behind closed doors. It's hard to imagine that there was a lot of debate going on behind closed doors about the facts of the case. Again, all they had to get to is, could a reasonable person have a serious doubt about whether Kyle Rittenhouse was guilty in this case? And the answer is, there is not a reasonable person on earth who wouldn't have at least a pretty serious doubt about whether he was guilty in this particular case. So again, if I had to guess, I would think that maybe the jury was like, we'll sit around for a couple of days and have some pizza and beer and think about, trying to kick the can down the road a little bit. Maybe a mistrial gets declared, or maybe at the very least, it looks like we spent time considering the evidence. But you never know. There could have been a couple of holdouts who were convinced to go along with the not guilty verdict. Whatever the outcome here, it's the media response that's going to be so telling, because you can see the long faces in the media, right.
Yep. So pay attention to how this is going to be portrayed in the media. MSNBC, CNN, NBC. There it is. Just another reminder here. He fatally shot 2 people at a protest in Kenosha. Look, Kyle Rittenhouse had every right to be in Kenosha. His father lived out there. He had family out there. I mean, the guy who he shot, supposedly, pay attention to the mainstream media, because they're going to come out and they're going to say this is another indictment against the oppressive classes of America, another win for white supremacy, another victory. It's all going to be specious lies that reaffirms that they're forever the oppressed class and they will never, ever be vindicated.
Now, if we tune over to MSNBC, I guarantee you that there are a bunch of media figures who are decrying the nature of America's criminal justice system. Well, if Kyle Rittenhouse had been black and his victims had been white, et cetera, et cetera, or if Kyle Rittenhouse had been black and his victims had been black, and all the rest of it. The reality is the prosecution never had a case here. They never had a case. And by the way, if Kyle Rittenhouse had been a black guy and his victims had been black, you never would have heard the story.
Right.
It never would have been a story in the first place because that sort of shooting takes place on a regular basis in Chicago. The reason this was a national story from the get-go is because the media wanted a narrative and then.
Thank you. This is another black guy shooting another black guy. You're not going to hear about it because this type of thing happens every day. And of course, the mainstream media ignores that, you know? Rather, it's about the broad narrative. It's all about the broad narrative.
The narrative that they wanted from the get-go was evil white Trump supporters are out there shooting social justice protesters. Yep. And none of that was true. It just wasn't true from beginning to end. So-
Yep. Evil white Trump supporting members were shooting helpless Antifa protesters. Give me a freaking break.
Good for the jury, good for the judge, and I hope that Rittenhouse, I hope he takes the media members who are declaring him murderer,
right?
The people at Facebook who were refusing to allow anyone to donate to his legal defense fund. I hope he takes these bastards to the cleaners. I hope he makes out like a bandit because people need to pay for lying about people to the point where they end up in the middle of murder trials for which they clearly bear no culpability.
What about the prosecutors? Do you think, for instance, that they should have declared a mistrial? And what's going to happen to these prosecutors now?
I mean, I think that, frankly, I think the judge is probably waiting to see what the verdict was. So if this came down as a hung jury, I wouldn't have been surprised if the judge said, okay, mistrial with prejudice.
Yeah.
And he says, listen, we're going to have to retry this anyway, but you don't get to retry it. You blew it. Mistrial with prejudice. It wouldn't have surprised me if it had come down guilty and he had said mistrial. If it came down with acquittal, then that solves all the judge's problems. Right now, he doesn't have to do anything. Judges don't like being reversed on appeal. And so, I think what the judge is probably concerned about is guilty verdict. He doesn't declare a mistrial, and then immediately this thing is reversed on appeal because the prosecutors were just involved in too much shady behavior right here. And by the way, it's very interesting to watch who has shifted sides on how judges are supposed to be in the courtroom. So the left loves judges who are very pro-defendant, except when they don't like the defendant. That seems to be the common way of the world here. So this judge was one of their favorites for years because he was famously pro-defendant. The minute they don't like the guy in the dock, then all of a sudden this judge is a rabid right-wing nutcase who plays God Save the USA, God Bless the USA on a cell phone. So,
Yep. And that's one thing that I've noticed about the left. You're either an obstacle or a tool to be used for their nefarious schemes. Anyways, guys, I'm happy with the verdict. Thank God. This is another win for our justice system. Although there was much outside media pressure and, I'm sure the jury, they had a very difficult decision in rendering this verdict in spite of, the death threats and amongst other things. But I want to congratulate. I just want to say thank God that our justice system has prevailed and I still have an institution that I can believe in. And it has not been infused with the woke ideology. So, thank God. Like, comment, subscribe. Unwoke yourself because we are unwoke in this nation. One by one, each day at a time.